Hello everybody. Today we want to talk about how TBLT, that stands for Task-Based Language Teaching, our focus is TBLT. But before that, we want to have a very short review over the history of language teaching methods. But again, because we are short of time, I will skip some slides and go quickly through the somehow traditional methods of language teaching in order to go to task-based language teaching, and then we will focus on it. So from 1850s to 1950s, we have grammar translation as the dominant traditional language teaching method. As you know, in grammar translation, the emphasis was on learning to read and write, and the focus was on grammatical rules, syntactic structures, rote memorization of vocabulary items, and translation of literary texts. So, mother tongue played a great role because translation was somehow highlighted in this method. And vocabulary was taught in the form of list of isolated words. Now, if you remember what we said in the previous session of discourse analysis, we somehow said that traditional methods of language teaching are all victim, or let's say accused of, so much focus on the form in terms of decontextualized or isolated structures. And the same thing happens here when we talk about grammar translation. So much emphasis on isolated lists of either grammatical structures or vocabulary items. And long, elaborate explanations of the intricacies of grammar was again focused on in grammar translation. Medium of instruction was the mother tongue. As you know, in grammar translation method, somehow translation from English into the mother tongue of the students and vice versa. And no focus on productive, mostly let's say on speaking skills. So oral use of language was somehow neglected. And speaking and listening were mediated. Let's say, and they were mediated through the mother tongue, not directly through the, let's say, second language. But in early midst of the 20th century, we had a kind of demand for the ability to speak in English as the medium of communication across the world. And reformers reconsidered the nature of language and learning. So the need for communication, or the need for communicative language teaching. It is Berlin's direct method, but I don't know whether we have enough time to focus on it, because as I told you before, we want to focus on task-based language teaching. So you can quickly go to the items provided for you here. But the most important part is the emphasis on oral interaction in direct method and spontaneous use of language. When we say spontaneous use of language, it means thinking directly through or in the second language without resort to the mother tongue as a medium, without resort to translation as a medium. So there is no translation and little, if any, analysis of grammatical rules and structures here. This means that there was no explicit or focused attention on grammatical structures, and they were somehow contextualized in this method. The principles of the direct method somehow are summarized here. Classroom instruction was conducted in a target language, so no traces of L1 here. There was an inductive approach to grammar, as I told you, implicit teaching of grammar instead of explicit focus on grammatical rules. And only everyday, or let's say those vocabulary items that were used in everyday conversations, everyday language use, were taught in the classes, and abstract vocabulary was taught by association of ideas, again, through conversations or reading passages. And then we have the audio-visual method with the outbreak of the Second World War. You know that another name for audio-visual method is Army method, and that's because it happened, or let's say it emerged with the outbreak of the Second World War. And there was the need to become orally proficient, and another name for it is the Army method, and also the MIM method. MIM stands for mimicry, and the next one, MEM, stands for memorization, because these are the two dominant techniques, mimicking in order to look native-like in pronunciation, okay, or in language fluency, and memorization, because it was the major technique in, let's say, audio-visual method. I want to go to task-based language teaching quickly because we do not have enough time. Now, when you hear the name TBLT, that stands for task-based language teaching, you should quickly remember communicative language teaching, because communicative language teaching is, because TBLT is one of the offshoots of communicative language teaching. Now, there are some ideas associated with CLT. One of them is the Delheim's concept of communicative competence. Before the time of CLT, when you wanted to define the concept of language proficiency, you only defined it in terms of linguistic proficiency. That referred to the micro-level linguistic elements like grammar, like let's say vocabulary items, even collocations, but at the micro level, it means without taking consideration of the macro level elements like situational context, like social context. So let's say decontextualize vocabulary items or grammatical structures. But after that, Delheim provided the concept of communicative competence. Communicative competence concentrates, besides the linguistic competence, it somehow focuses on some higher order abilities and skills that the language learners should acquire, like socio-pragmatic competence or strategic competence. Okay, so here we see the need for communication, or the need to develop communicative skills. And another important concept is humanistic approach to language teaching, which is somehow realized through learner-centeredness in language classes. Before that, the teacher was somehow the authority in the language classroom. It was the teacher who decided about what's going on in the classes, the activities, even regarding the needs and interests of the learners. It was the teacher who decided. But from the time of communicative language teacher and the idea of learner-centeredness, the teacher came to the students and asked them about their needs, their interests, and somehow take their emotional states or their humanistic aspects into consideration. And there was emphasis on meaning and communication. And besides linguistic accuracy, here we have fluency as well as appropriacy. And let's say appropriacy or functional appropriacy is even more important than mere fluency. Maybe you are fluent as well as accurate in spoken language, but you are not somehow, you do not make use of language appropriately. It means that you're not familiar with elements of context, what linguistic forms or even non-linguistic functions are appropriate for this specific context of use or others. some offshoots of CLT. It means that the methods that somehow came in the shadow of CLT. The most important of them, or let's say the most popular one, is TBLT, or task-based language teaching. The others are content-based language teaching, multiple intelligences, and strategy training. But we just want to focus on TBLT. Now, please tell me, what is a task? Do you have any idea about the definition of a task, or the differences between, for example, a drill and a task? You can have a look at the definition provided for you here. See, a task is a meaningful activity. Yeah.
Some practice to learn language.
Some practice. So what's the difference between a task and a drill? Because drill is a practice of things.
Well, we should ask the careful students.
Yeah. The difference is like practicing are not obliged to, while a task we are obliged to do.
Sorry,
It's
again,
a kind of activity.
again, please. Could you please repeat?
Task is an activity that we are obliged to do it, while practice is not. Like during the class.
Obliged to do? What do you mean?
It's just like
Obligatory? Others ideas?
Task, it means students. I'm so sorry.
What's the meaning of a task?
That's
What the task? And the differences between task and drills, for example, or other classroom exercises.
Students do activities inside the classroom.
Do the activities.
Yes, inside the classroom to learn language.
Okay. No other ideas?
Yes, actually, I think we have tasks and we have admissions, and the admission contains a lot of tasks. So the task itself, I think it's like a homework or something like that, or maybe you ask your student to do something. It's called task.
Thank you. Now, let me go to the somehow difference between drill and task quickly, a drill and task quickly, and you will get the meaning, I think, simply. Suppose you are teaching some grammatical structures using audiolingual method. I mean, your method is ALM, audiolingual method that focuses on repetition,
Memorization also.
memorization,
Yes, because
mechanical learning, roles learning. You write the structure on the board and then repeatedly ask the same structure, ask your students about the same structure. Okay? Let me give you a simple example as I provided for you the previous session for the context. Suppose you want to teach the concept of time through asking your students about the time. What time is it? Okay? The teacher goes to the board and draws the picture of a clock or something like that, and then 10 o'clock is demonstrated on that somehow painting. Okay? And the teacher asks the students, what time is it? All the students answer what? It's 10. Because what has been demonstrated on the board is 10 o'clock. Repeatedly, I ask you one by one, what time is it? What's the answer? It's 10. What time is it? It's 10. What time is it? So, it is rote learning. It is a drill. Mechanical learning. Without any change in, let's say, or without contextualizing it in real life actually.
It's drilling.
It is drilling. Yeah, it is drilling. And you even maybe do not understand the meaning of what time is it, or even you do not understand the meaning of it's 10. But just you see that all students will answer it is 10, you mimic it and say it's 10 without any understanding even on the meaning. Now, what happens if you have, or let's say how it comes, if you want to change the same drill into what? Into a task. At the beginning, I mean, in the first stage, you can make use of the same activity. Draw the picture of an clock on the board, and then what time is it? It's 10. But that's enough. In the next stage, you should go to your students one-to-one, and for example, when I want to practice it through a task-based approach, I will come to Ryan and say that, what time do you get up in the morning? Or do you get up at 10? I want to focus on 10 again. Do you get up at 10 every day? What's your answer?
Either yes or no.
Either yes or no. Yes, I do. Sorry. I get up at 10 or no. If he says no, I will ask him what time do you get up? Again, I will go to another student, but I forget about the question that I asked Ryan. Why? Because if I ask the same question, the students again will memorize what Ryan said and want to mimic it again. I contextualize my questions. I make them real. How far is it? Let's go to Nala in order to ask the next question. What time do you leave home every morning in order to get to your classes?
7:30.
7:30. And what time do you arrive home?
3 o'clock.
Yeah, completely real answers,
Yeah, that's a real answer.
Real answers. And in this way, you make it real. That's why we say that tasks are taken from real life activities. It is not something far, it is not something that you cannot imagine or say that how it is possible to make use of tasks. It is, maybe some say that it is time consuming, it needs a lot of energy. No, these are, tasks are as simple as such questions. When you make your questions real, contextualized, and authentic, instead of drilling and drilling and drilling. Why? Because drilling is mechanical, and the students will memorize something that has been already practiced in the classroom, and you cannot control or you cannot trace you correctly based on what he or she has memorized, and you do not understand whether he or she is right or wrong. Sorry, I mean whether he or she is following you or not. So that's what we mean by a task. Make the activity contextualized, real, and authentic. Let's say make it meaningful. So a task is a meaningful activity in which learners use the content and language together. So both the content, why? Because as Ryan and Nabal said, they are conveying some message, they are conveying some content. The time that they get up, the time that they leave home, or the time that they arrive. So they convey both content and form, content and language. In other words, materials should be designed to lead towards a communicative task in which learners use the content and the language they have learned in that unit. So the teacher should be ready before coming to the classroom. The teacher should plan some questions in order to contextualize the grammatical structure or the vocabulary items that he or she wants to teach in that specific session. The task provides opportunities for the learners to use their linguistic knowledge and skills in real context of language use. The input provides the language and content, however, the learners should go beyond the information in the input. It means that because you somehow raise that is somehow consciously selected by the students. Consciously selected by the teacher, but the learners are not conscious about it. That's the point of the task. the teacher designs the task consciously, but the students are not conscious of the linguistic part of it. For example, you are dealing with the kids and you want to teach them colors. You tell your students that for the second session, please bring something that you require in order to paint a house or paint something in the classroom. The students come to the class and as a task, draw a picture. And while drawing that picture, they will learn some vocabulary items related to colors. Or, for example, some imperative sentences. When the kid leaves the classroom and go back home, when the mother asks him or her, what did you learn today in the classroom? What's the answer?
Like painting.
I drew a picture. He never says that I learned colors today. He says what? I drew a picture. I drew a picture, or I had
The non-linguistic aspect.
the non-linguistic aspect of the task is somehow what very important here, and it should be at the level of the learners. I mean, based on their interest, based on their age, you manipulate this non-linguistic aspect. For kids, just singing, jumping, like this, or different games in the classroom. But for adults, you will use cognitive tasks like problem solving, like some group discussions or peer discussions. And then through that, you somehow teach the linguistic input or provide them with the linguistic input that you have in your mind. The students are not aware of the linguistic aspect of the task. They will unconsciously learn it, just like what happens in natural learning or in natural approach to language acquisition, very directly. Okay, thank you. Now, please ask me any questions regarding the design of the task, if you have any. So the important part is that you should think about the appropriate non-linguistic aspect of the task based on the level and the cognitive abilities of your learners.
As far as I know, we have like two types of tasks. That is the first one, which is real task.
Real task?
Yeah. And the second one based on pedagogic task. Like
The second one is pedagogic.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the language classroom, pedagogic means what? For instructional purposes, for educational purposes.
Yeah.
Now, suppose that you are reading a piece of newspaper at night, and tomorrow you have your language classroom, okay? You're reading a newspaper, okay, and you find that a piece of news in terms of structure, in terms of grammatical forms, and also vocabulary items are appropriate for that specific teaching purposes. For example, teaching conditional sentences. And when you decide to take this piece of news to your classroom and say that, tomorrow when I want to teach conditional sentences, instead of focusing on the textbook and let's say instead of focusing on decontextualized examples of the textbook, I will take it to my classroom. Yeah, I'm answering the questions. Okay.
Doctor, I just want to say something.
Sorry,
Alright.
let me finish my answer. Okay. And now, because you are taking some pieces of real life for pedagogical purposes into the classroom, we call it a pedagogic task.
Yes, from the point of my major, I think there are some concepts that can be used in let's say, designing some tasks. For example, there's a concept called localization and foreignization. Yeah. Like to make the examples more realistic to the environment where we're teaching, we can use localization. One time I found a board game, but the examples in those board games are, you know, something related to the Western life. For example, drinking wine, having a girlfriend, and so on.
You can localize it.
Exactly. We can localize them and make them appropriate to the environment where we're teaching.
That's it.
And one more thing, you brought up something about grammar translation method. Okay, this method does not apply, or is not useful anymore, because we have two types of languages. Because this concept is based on teaching the Latin